Hi, I'm Ed Sobey for Kids Invent. We're going to look at a couple of weather charts. This is a primer on understanding weather by looking at charts. And we hope you'll find this interesting and fun. We'll start by looking at the Earth Null School, and we had that reference in the notes to you. Wonderful resource for looking at both the atmosphere and the ocean surface. And if you get used to this, I think you'll find it just a very fun site to mess around with. Here we have honed in on the surface winds of the North Pacific. And you can see we have typical trade winds coming from the northeast, as we would expect to see. Little bit of trade winds coming from the southeast, but not so much. But we've got some nice weather systems here in the South Pacific. Now this is clockwise, but because it's in the southern hemisphere, that's a low pressure region or a storm. Here's another one. These storms will be migrating in that direction. Here's some lows, and they're going across, and they'll come into the Gulf of Alaska, and the bright color there means that there's a pretty good wind spiraling into that low, and as it does, lifting the air up. As that air gets lifted up, the humidity in the air will condense, form clouds, and possibly rain or snow. So this is the North Pacific with some serious action going on out there. We're going to flip over and look at the pressure system and the winds in another chart. This is the Ocean Prediction Service done by NOAA for the North Pacific. And the one problem with this is it's kind of busy. But when you look, here is that low system that we saw in the Earth Null School. And again, around the low in the northern hemisphere, the winds circulate counterclockwise. Look at the ferocity of those winds. Each one of these little symbols tells you the speed and the direction of the wind. So the wind is blowing in that direction. If you imagine that's an arrow, and these little bumps, these barbs on the end are fletching, or the feathers of the arrow travels in that direction, and there's 10, 20, 30, 40 knot winds at the surface. If you experience that here in Fresno, there'd be a fair amount of damage and trees blowing down. Here is a single larger pennant on the end of a wind arrow, wind vector. That's 50 knots. So here's 60, here's 55. This one's a little bit shorter. So you can see some substantial wind all circulating around the low. So we had the animated version of that. Here is the classic surface pressure and wind speed. Here is a cold front moving through with the low right behind it. Here's the warm front, and so this cold is going to catch up. The cold front moves faster. If we looked at this tomorrow, the cold would move over, come over, and sweep under that warm front, lifting and producing more storms right there. Here are the pressures, 1,022 millibars, high pressure, and at the low we have 948 millibars, and so you can see there's a substantial difference in the atmospheric pressure at the surface caused by the highs and the lows. Developing storm, developing gale. Tough time to be in the North Pacific. So now we're going to look at a couple other weather charts and hopefully give you a good feel for how to use those. Here we're looking at a new image from Earth Null School. This is today, the day we are shooting, and you can see lots of action in the oceans, and this is the surface wind. Look at this low pressure up here in Maine, or just north of Maine, and a corresponding high pressure right here on the central Atlantic part of the United States. And those two fit together as highs and lows usually do. So we'll look at those in just a second. We've got air screaming down in the across Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico. But let's look at those two, this one especially. We'll flip the image over to show the surface pressure, and there's that low. The air is coming around there, and here's the high with the air screaming around there and pushing now down some cold air from the north down into Florida. So let's now look at the cloud cover for the day. And we've got that band of cold air coming down, and we've got a whole stream of a band of clouds up there. We can see up here that we've got not really thick clouds, but certainly growing clouds right there, and over much of the United States, not clear skies, but partially clear. So there is a one-to-one relationship between the Earth null school projection of the winds and the surface pressure. The surface pressure, the atmospheric pressure, is driving those winds, and those winds are manifestations of storm systems, mid-latitude storm systems that control our weather. This is not easy stuff to talk about in a theoretical sense, but if you look at the weather reports on any or several of the online sources that we suggest, and if you look at them day after day, you really start to get a feel for what the atmosphere is doing and how quickly it reacts. And when you see a reaction on the surface chart, what does that tell you about the weather coming in tomorrow? So we hope your students learn and generate some curiosity about how the atmosphere works, and we hope you learn as well and have a good time dealing with weather and climate.